All right, it looks like we're at the hour. Thanks everyone for joining us here at this webinar. My name is Q Mankus. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at Guava. And today I'm going to be going through this presentation with you on the cost savings of archiving. Really happy everyone could be here today. I'm excited for the information that we're going to bring you. To begin with, there's a few things that I want to just for everyone to take note of. If you do have any questions as we're going through the presentation, there will be time at the end to be able to do some Q&A. So what I would ask is that if you have questions, feel free to put them through. There's a chat window and a Q&A window there on your WebEx interface. Feel free to put any questions through there. So what we're going to do, as you can see from the topic, we're talking about how your organization can save money by archiving. This is going to be a great topic, we hope, and that you can benefit greatly from it. We're going to be touching first on some ideas on, what problems can come through collaboration systems, things that you may see as you're using an email system. We'll touch on some scenarios on cost savings and benefits of archiving, some drivers for archiving, and then at the end we'll talk a little bit about the solution that we offer, that Guava offers in Retain Unified Archiving, and how that solution in particular can save you money. So once again, thanks everyone for being here. We'll jump into this presentation. So let's talk about some deficiencies that you might see with email systems. And depending on your email system, this could be a little different. But some of the things that you could really see from an email system, obviously, before I get into the deficiencies, we all know that it's essential to have an email system. It's essential for productivity and collaboration. We use it every day, right? And we use it a lot to be able to collaborate. However, with an email system, it can cause a number of issues when it comes especially to archiving. Like, let's think about this for a minute. You've probably experienced this in your organization, is this idea of silos of data. So with an email system, each mailbox stores an employee's data within their individual desktop or laptop. It could be incoming, outgoing messages, appointments, task folders, etc. So these inherently an email system will do that, whether that's Exchange or GroupWise or any of those on-premise type systems will create those silos of data. And of course in the cloud it can do that as well, because now it may not be stored on their desktop, but it is stored in their mailbox. So this can create a problem if you have to go back and search across the entire system to be able to find messages. Also, it can create a problem is, let's say, if they have that on a personal machine, what happens if that machine gets destroyed or if is corrupted? That data can be lost. And then, of course, if you're using Exchange, you probably have experienced the issue with PST files and what that can do, and being able to go through and locate those. Also, another thing too is that as your email system, as more people are sending and receiving email, of course your data store is going to grow, and that can actually cause your email system to slow down. And that doesn't matter if you have a cloud-based system or an on-prem system. As email messages grow and as your data needs grow, your email system will slow down, which of course leads to another problem, which is expensive and ever-growing storage. If it's on-premise, it's something that you have to now go out and buy extra servers to be able to deal with that excess load. If it's in the cloud, you're more than likely going to pay for the excess storage. And then finally, like I said, with the other things with the silos of data, personal archives, is that difficulty in retrieving data, whether that's in case of litigation or regulatory investigation, or just to be able to restore an email by having these silos of data and personal archives. It's difficult to go and access those. Okay, now we've talked a little bit about the issues that email systems can bring when it comes to archiving. So let's move on to why you should archive. Now, depending on your organization, there are different reasons why you should be archiving, and different things that you should be archiving as well. Obviously, all of us should be archiving email. Social media is big. You need to be looking at monitoring and archiving that, as well as mobile communications. And you saw some of that from the poll that we did, and I'll share some of those results in just a minute here. But really, the reasons why you should be archiving just differ depending on your organization. If you're a regulated organization, there's going to be compliance issues and regulations that will make you want to ensure that you're archiving. If you're in a type of industry where it's litigious, where you're involved in court cases a lot, that's another reason to archive. And then, of course, everybody should be worried about their storage management, reducing that cost of storage. There's another huge concept, which is knowledge management, being able to ensure that you can access and view your information. And then, of course, there's the end user and IT productivity, and we'll get into these a little bit here, and we'll talk about the cost savings as well. But really, by having an archive, getting that information off of the live email server and into a secondary system, you can increase end user and IT productivity because your email system is going to run better. And we'll talk about a little bit more about some of the other things here. With storage management, which is the first driver for archiving, is that you can save considerable amount of space, and you can reduce the size of your storage needs and the cost of your storage needs. So let's think for a moment that, let's say you have an email server that supports 1,000 users, and that each email server needs to store about a terabyte of mailbox data, because each mailbox could have about a gigabyte of storage needs. So if you have 1,000 users, a gigabyte per mailbox, you're talking a terabyte of data. Now, this may not be typical that a mailbox has a gigabyte, so just depending on you could scale that down a little bit. But in the same realm, you could see that your storage needs could greatly increase. And being able to go back and manage that kind of content and be able to pay for the storage, go back and search that can be daunting. And of course, if something fails, let's say one of your servers fails and you have that much data, think of how long it will be to get that back and the downtime that you'll run into. However, if you have an archiving system, that would not be on your live system. So if your system does go down, you have a separate system to be able to go get your information from. And also, generally speaking, with an archive, there's compression and single instance storage, meaning that your storage footprint is going to be lower if you have an archive, because it's not going to have to be the entire mailbox footprint with those servers. It can be actually reduced by having that as an archive. And of course, the other great thing is that you actually give access. You can actually give access to end users so that they can go back and access their own archive. And so say they have an email that is lost off of their live mailbox, they can go back and do that as well. So that's another great point in archiving, is that you can manage your storage, you can reduce storage, increase performance. Well, that's another point too that I did kind of gloss over, is that as you take that information and archive it, you can pull it off of your live system. So now your live system, your live email system, can go faster, can work better, because it's not bogged down with all these messages that are stored there. Here's something that's really interesting that I just wanted to take note of, is where's your data, right? This is an interesting survey that Osterman Research did a couple years ago about where your data could potentially be located. And this is, once again, kind of discussing that idea of silos of data. It could be in a home computer, a smartphone, a laptop, other collaboration systems, email and file servers. So your data can be spread out all over. You need to make sure that you stay on top of that. So going along with the drivers is you have this idea of knowledge management. Really, the communications that your employees have, whether that's internally or with customers, partners, or other prospective customers, that is really your organization's digital heritage. Being able to keep a record of appointments, contacts, and tasks, you can see what has happened in the past. Or maybe you want to go back and see what happened on a project. You had a certain project that was going on. There was collaboration that was happening, emails being sent back and forth, appointments being set. By being able to go back and look at that, that can help in the future. You could go ahead in the future, and if you haven't a similar project, using that archive and that archive data, you can go back and see what has happened. And being able to preserve your corporate identity and history, you'll be able to better see what you should do in the future. So once again, this is important. Your organization and your employees are communicating daily. There's important information that's being shared. You need to be able to keep that, and you need to be able to easily access that. So really, that is another point for archiving, is that you need to be able to make sure that you're preserving your corporate data. And then we're going to get into the cost pretty quick here. I just have a couple other points to make on the drivers here. I just want to make sure, because this really hits hard on the cost savings, and that is something that's a little less quantifiable, and that is productivity. By being able to give your users access to their own archive and allow them to view archive messages and restore them to the email box if they need to, you're really empowering your end users, and you're making it so that your IT staff is not bogged down in those kind of requests. They can focus on what they need to do, their core competencies, and not be worrying about restoring emails for end users, accessing and doing a search of your entire email system for litigation or regulatory compliance. By having an archive and giving access to that archive to different people, you're going to actually save time, free up IT resources, and improve employee productivity. There was another Austrian research survey done recently that says that a typical email user sends and receives 110 emails per day. So an organization with about 2,500 email users, that's about 17.5 million emails every 3 months. So let's say that you have to go through and search that even periodically from those silos of data or from an inefficient archive. That can really make things difficult. So you need to make sure that you have an archiving system that stores it, compresses it, and that can be easily accessed. That'll improve productivity, and it will make sure that everybody's happier in your organization. Furthermore, you have this idea, I won't hit on this too much, but you have the idea that there's regulations out there that you need to be able to comply with. Make sure you know what those are, and realize what you need to be doing to comply with those, which is basically making sure that you archive and that you can access that archive. And then, of course, with litigation, if you ever are involved in litigation, you need to be able to have legal holds. You need to be able to perform e-discovery quickly and easily, and that's all in consideration when it comes to archiving. And then finally, there are additional benefits as well. I talked a lot about your digital heritage. That's a benefit. Of course, some other benefits are being able to monitor communications. You can go back and find if there's been offensive communication. You can see if sensitive or confidential information has been communicated. And if you have a proactive solution that actually monitors messages before they're posted, you can actually prevent situations from happening. Then there's this also idea of analytics. You can go back and view and see what has happened. You can see the interactions that have gone on. You can see what employees are communicating more with email, who may need different storage needs. There's a lot of information that you can glean from an archiving system, there's a great amount of data that you can find from having an archiving solution. So those are the drivers and the benefits of archiving. Now let's get into the cost savings. And I'm going to give you a few scenarios. And I want to start off by saying that a lot of this information came from a great white paper that we have on best practices for managing email archiving. If you'd like access to that, please put that in the chat or Q&A. I'll send you the link. Also, otherwise, you can always go to guava.com and go to the white papers there, and you'll be able to find that white paper there. So let's start out here with end user access. That's a cost saving, and I hit a lot on that. So let's take an example of without archiving. So we know that users will periodically delete an email that they'll need at some point, right? This has happened, I would assume. It's happened to all of us. So in this example, there's a 500-person organization, and each employee needs to recover just one email per month. What this results in is a total of 6,000 emails that need to be recovered each year. That's 500 employees with one email per month times 12 months. Okay, and let's assume that IT requires an average of 30 minutes to recover each email from a backup tape or from the email system. So if IT has the bandwidth to recover all these emails, IT staff members will spend about 3,000 hours annually. That's 6,000 emails, 30 minutes per email, recovering this content. With average cost, the total IT cost of email recovery will be about $115,000, about an equivalent of 1.5 full-time IT staff members. Okay, so you can see that even in a small organization with your employees needing to get their email back, those costs can being driven up exponentially. So now let's assume with an archiving solution, it's been configured to allow users to access their own archived content. If we assume that 5 minutes will be required to recover an email, and the average employee salary is identical to that of IT staff members, for this situation we will, then the cost of the employees recovering their own documents will be about $19,000 annually. 6,000 emails, 5 minutes of recovery. The total annual savings compared to IT recovering the documents will be about $86,000. Because what you do is let's factor in the cost of the archiving system. We'll say on average about $10,000 per year. So that gives us a savings, like you see, of $86,155. So you can see that, yes, an archiving system will cost you a little bit of money, but in the sense of allowing end users to access the archive and restore their own emails, you're saving a lot of money in IT time. And not only are you saving money there, like I said, some of the costs that are not quantifiable is the freed up time that your IT staff will have to be able to do other things, and then also reducing frustration of your end users because they can access their own archive. Okay, let's get into another example here. We've got reducing downtime costs. So let's look at this for a minute. So one of the fundamental problems with storing content on your live email servers instead of an archive is that either email storage on servers will continue to grow over time, users will offload content to personal archives where it is much more difficult to access, or they delete important information that they should preserve for long periods. So that's a problem. Also, storing very large amounts of content on email servers can reduce performance. We talked about that as well, and that's also difficult to quantify. It can also make server restoration after a crash much more lengthy because you have all that stuff stored on your live server. hard to restore. So let's talk a little bit about the actual part of restoring email if there's a hard disk crash. That is what we'll touch on here. So with archiving, if there's, let's say, a hard disk crash, let's assume that an email server crashes once per year and that each server supports 500 users. And that restoration requires 6 hours without an archive compared to 2 hours with an archive. And let's assume that the fully burdened salary for email users is $38 an hour, and that users are 25% less productive during an email downtime incident, such as server restoration, which is pretty safe to say. So based on these assumptions, the 500 users, $38 per hour, and that people are 25% less productivity, the total productivity cost savings of having an archive system in this situation for just one email restoration would be $19,230, based on the following. The cost without archiving would be $28,845. That's $38 roughly, with 500 users, 6 hours, and the lower productivity of 25%. The cost with archiving is $9,615. That's $38 roughly per hour, 500 users, and 2 hours. So downtime costs are reduced because restoring emails are much easier and quicker. So there's another cost savings in archiving. One other thing that I wanted to make mention is we do have an overview paper of this as well, and everyone on this call that registered for this webinar and is attending will get that paper as well. Okay. I did have a message come across that they are not seeing my slides change. Is that the case for everyone? If so, please shoot me a message there in the chat. Otherwise, if it's okay, just we'll keep going. Doesn't look so. Okay, so let's go on to e-discovery or regulatory audit. So once again, we're going to go with this 500-seat organization. So let's assume that this organization needs to respond to an e-discovery or regulatory audit request of all electronic content stored on its backup. And let's assume that IT will spend about 30 minutes going back and trying to recover that information from the server and copying that data to a central repository for processing by legal staff. And then there's also another probably 24 hours of IT staff time to address issues like corrupted PST files, other data that cannot be read. And then let's assume that legal staff will require about 320 person hours to search through this repository for relevant content. This is the equivalent of one person working full-time for about 8 weeks. Of course, this figure will vary widely based on the type of data that legal must search, but it's based on a real-world example. So this is pretty standard. This has happened. So let's using the examples above without an archiving system. An organization will spend 250 person hours of IT staff time at a total cost of about $10,538. 250 hours at $38.46 an hour. And that will be the time to recover the data from the email system or from backup tapes. Now, the cost of legal staff will be $64,000, which is 320 hours at $200 an hour. This yields a total labor cost of $74,538 to respond to a single e-discovery request or regulatory audit for a small organization. And so, yeah, this can scale greatly depending on your organization and how your stuff is stored. Now, with an archiving solution, let's assume the organization has an archiving system that can be accessed by legal staff directly. Now, we know that archiving systems can vary widely in price based on feature set. We have a cost that we have for our archiving solution. It just can vary greatly. But let's take, and we'll just throw in a cost of a 3-year cost of $60 per seat. This would be your acquisition, support, and maintenance costs. So meaning that's about $30,000 for the entire organization. And we'll assume that the organization will need to take 10 e-discovery or regulatory audit requests over a 3-year period. So if we spread the cost of the archiving system over just these requests, the resulting cost per request would be $3,000 for the archiving system. So using the same assumptions as in the above example, we can eliminate the IT costs because legal staff can access the archive directly without involvement from IT. And because the archived information has already been indexed before it's archiving, searching the archive will be simpler and faster. So that's the assumptions we're making here. Pretty standard when it comes to an archiving system. So if we conservatively assume that the legal staff will be halved when using an archive, the legal labor will be about $32,000. That's 160 hours at $200 per hour. Although in many cases a reduction in time spent by legal will be greater than this, for this case we will put it at that. So based on these assumptions, the cost of a single e-discovery exercise or regulatory audit will be about $35,000. $32,000 in labor, $3,000 for the archiving system, resulting in a dramatic net savings per request. So if we put a rather conservative assumption of 10 e-discovery requests every 3 years, that results in a savings of about $395,000 over a 3-year period. So really, when it comes to an e-discovery or regulatory audit, there's huge savings mainly in labor. So because an archiving system is so much more efficient in recovering and accessing, I should say, emails for e-discovery or regulatory audits. Okay, so we've got 2 more examples, and we'll be set on the cost savings of archiving. Hope you've enjoyed these examples. I know that the information is interesting and can benefit you greatly depending on how your organization is set up. Sorry, that slide is actually redundant. This is the slide I really wanted. So here's an example of what a typical mid-sized organization could expect to realize. It's summarized here in this chart. This is a 3-year savings for the use of an archiving system in an organization of 500 users. So yeah, that's a pretty small organization. Well, mid-sized organization. A larger or smaller organization, it would scale. But so you're talking $850,000 over a 3-year period, and this was kind of what we went over: reducing downtime costs, end user service, e-discovery requests. Even the one that we didn't talk too much about is settling legal action before even going to trial. That could easily be accomplished through having an efficient archiving system. And then, of course, as I stated before, there are other cost savings that can be provided by having an archiving system that are difficult to quantify, but can be significant to your organization. Some of these things are the ability to eliminate data leaks, the ability to conduct ad hoc assessments for fine-tuning email use or retention policies, improve efficiency or effectiveness, and then the idea that I talked about before of improving employee morale because they're going to be able to access their own archive and not wait for IT to respond. There's many things that an archive does that's not quantifiable, and so be aware of that, and that there are many cost savings when it comes to an archive, and you can save your organization lots of money. And then you can also, there's other things that are not quantifiable. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the solution that Guava offers, and that's Retain. So Retain helps with everything that we just talked about. Let me just put it that way. The cost savings that we talked about, the examples I gave are not exactly specific to an organization using Retain, and we didn't want to pull a customer of ours and share that information. They're more of generic examples based on information that was gathered. However, the benefits and the cost savings that can be realized by using an archiving system, of course, are being done using Retain. And something with Retain that is unique is that it's a unified archive, meaning that all communications, whether that's email, multiple email systems, mobile, social media, instant messaging, and web search, it's all archived into one central unified archive. And that archive can be easily accessed, searched, and exported, giving you the ability to do the things that we've been talking about, being able to be prepared for an e-discovery regulatory audit, being able to give your users access to the archive so that they can restore their own email, allowing other named users like a legal team to access the Retain archive and search it. Then, of course, there are different parts to Retain. There's the email archiving piece, which archives Exchange, Office 365, Gmail, and or GroupWise. And if you have multiple email systems that are deployed in your organization, Retain can archive them, or a single as well. And Retain can be deployed on-premise or in the cloud. And, of course, Retain supports single instance storage, so that will reduce the size of your archive and your hardware costs. And there's great included regulatory tasks that can be done, like litigation holds, printing messages, forwarding, save, redact, and export. And as I stated, there's an ACL, so you can grant different access to different named users if you'd like. If you have an audit team that needs to access the archive, or a legal team, you can do that. And so now IT is not burdened with those kind of things that we've talked about. And then we have a great piece, which is Retain Social. And Retain Social is more than just archiving. We actually proactively monitor social media, instant messaging, and web searches. So if you can create policies that will allow your employees to access social media. However, it will prevent them from posting things that may be against your corporate policy. So if you have items that you don't want them to post, things about your company, sensitive information, or you don't want them to communicate inappropriate communications, that can be set up through Retain Social, so that if they try to post that, it will be monitored and blocked. And then everything is archived as well. And furthermore, with Retain Social, if they try to do a web search, same thing. That's being monitored. So if they try to search for something that's inappropriate, that will be prevented. If they're using IM and you want to prevent them from posting certain things on the instant messaging, that can be done as well. And as you can see, we support a number of social media and instant messaging platforms and search platforms, including Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Yammer. And then on the instant messaging side, you have Google Hangouts, Link, Yahoo, AOL Instant Messenger. And with search, you have Wikipedia searches, Yahoo searches, Bing, Google searches, and YouTube searches. And plus, there's also a workstation agent for off-network monitoring and archiving. So if you have an employee that's working remotely, there is an agent that can also monitor if they're not on your network. And there's also a corporate social media access portal that allows you to grant rights or grant access to people in your organization to access your corporate social media accounts without having to log in. And then, of course, as I stated, everything is archived. It's archived in context using intelligent threading. So when you go back and see, you can see the whole message string. And it's also all archived in that central archive with email and mobile communications. And speaking of that, with mobile, Retain Mobile archives primarily you have SMS, MMS, and phone call logs for Android, as well as BBM, PIN, SMS, and MMS, and phone call logs for BlackBerry. For BlackBerry, it's done via the BES, via BlackBerry Enterprise Service. For Android, it's done via an app on the phone, and that's all collected via the Retain collector and put into the Retain Unified Archive. And for iOS, there's something really cool that we do, and that is that we've teamed with CellTrust to give you encrypted and secure communications. And so what that does is there's a separate app on your phone, on the iPhone, that assigns a separate business number to that phone for them to be able to call, and that call is encrypted and secure, and to text. And that's also encrypted and secure. And then also, as those messages come in and go out, Retain will communicate with the CellTrust server and archive those. So this, once again, gives you the ability to monitor or gives you the ability to have those secure communications on iOS and archive them. Let me just show you a quick diagram there. This is an example of how that works. So CellTrust subscribers, as they're communicating subscriber to subscriber, that's all encrypted and secure. It goes through the CellTrust server. Retain archives that. If they're communicating with their phone call logs or text messages outside, it's all encrypted up until it goes to the carrier and to the non-subscribers. Once again, Retain pulls that information from the CellTrust server. So giving you once again the ability to have mobile communications and have that oversight and forensics of that. Here's an example of the archive viewer. So as you can see, it mimics your mailbox. It looks like an email system. Your folders are archived and brought over, so when your end users go into their own personal archive, it's going to look familiar to them. They can find the email messages that they have in those folders, and they can easily restore them or view them based on the rights that you give them. And of course, administrators and other named users can perform tasks like litigation holds, message tags, forward messages, export messages to restore them. When it comes to export, it can be exported to a PDF or a standalone archive viewer. And the standalone archive viewer is fully indexed. It can be placed onto a CD or a jump drive or other folder. It can be given to an outside team, and now they can search and perform redaction on that. Here's an example of the search. The great thing, once again, as I stated with Retain, is that it's a unified archive, so you don't have to know what message was sent. If you know what search term you're trying to use, if you're trying to go back and get a certain message, you type in what you're looking for, and Retain will pull in the results no matter what it is, whether that's an appointment, an instant message, a text message, a phone call log, an email, a Twitter message. It doesn't matter. All of it comes in directly into that search result across any kind of collaboration system. Oops. And here's an example of when I was talking about the social media side, an employee trying to post something on Facebook that was blocked because it violated policy. So it looks seamless to your users. It doesn't look like there's a separate system. It looks like just something that came from Facebook, preventing them from posting that. And here's an example of criteria that you could set up to be able to monitor and filter different social media and web searches. And furthermore, we give you many ways to access the archive. The web access archive viewer is great, but you can also access it from Outlook or directly from GroupWise and the GroupWise web access or the Outlook web app. Here's an example of the Outlook client. So the same kind of functionality that you'd have in the web access viewer is here. You can search, and then also you can cache your archives. So if somebody is an off-site user that may not necessarily always have access to the internet, they can still access their archive because it will be cached. So to finish up, I want to remind everyone that there are huge cost savings, that by having an archive, there are benefits and there are cost savings. And then with Retain, you can realize those benefits and cost savings. Retain has secure archive of all your electronic communication. You can ensure that regulation compliance, and you can easily go back and access and search that archive from one central interface. I'd encourage you to, if you haven't tried out Retain, to give us a try. Download a free 30-day trial at guava.com/download. You can view more information about Retain at guava.com/retain. Or if you'd like to get a quote for it, feel free to visit us at guava.com/quote, or even feel free to give us a call. Glad you could be here on this webinar today. Hope the information was good for you. As I stated before, we will send you a link to the paper that kind of goes over the information that I discussed on the cost savings here, so if you want to review this. Also, this webinar has been recorded, so you can go back and view it and share it with others. And be sure to visit our YouTube channel at Guava TV, so youtube.com/Guava TV, to view any other recordings that we have of webinars. So now we do have some time for questions. So if you do have questions, feel free to put those through. It looks like we do have a few questions that have come across. So we'll get to those now. But if there are any that you didn't have a chance to put through, feel free to put those through. And give me just a moment here, and I'm going to pull up those questions. One moment here. Just looking through them here to get all the questions. Once again, if you have questions, feel free to put those through in the chat and Q&A panels. So one that came across is how does the monitoring and filtering work with Retain, with the social media side of it? So yeah, I didn't go into detail on that. So what Retain does is it's what we're talking about there is on the network. So your employees that are accessing social media or your corporate social media accounts that are on the network, Retain can monitor those. So as people are trying to post or view social media, Retain can monitor what they're doing. And the same applies for instant messaging. So what Retain does is it integrates with the firewall. So as information is coming in or going out of your organization, Retain will look at that and prevent and block and filter that communication as it's coming in and going out. And it's based on a per user basis, so each user that's accessing that social media can do that. Okay, so here's another one. How does it integrate? So as we said, there was a few people on Exchange. How does it integrate with Exchange? Does it pull the messages from the mailbox or from Outlook? So this one, great question. So with Exchange, what it does is it integrates directly with the Exchange system, and it uses impersonation or the journaling mailbox. So depending on how you want to set that up, it can archive everything from the journaling mailbox or through using impersonation. Okay, here's another one. Can we choose what piece to archive? So can we archive email but not social media, or email and social media but not mobile? Yes. So with Retain, each one of those pieces that I talked about, it's a module that you can implement. So you would implement Retain, and then you choose which portion you want to archive. If you want to archive email today and social media later, you can go ahead and be archiving email and later go ahead and implement the social media archiving piece. So there are just different modules that you can deploy. Okay, on the mobile side it says if the user has multiple devices, how does that work? Retain supports multiple devices per user. It's tied to a username, so there's not a limit to the number of devices. So it'll just look at the device that they have, tie it back to that username, and then it will archive. So you'd be able to have multiple devices archived into Retain. Okay, so that looks like all of the questions we have right now. If we didn't get to your question or you didn't have a chance to ask that, feel free to contact us. Let me go back to that slide here, our contact slide. Thanks again, everyone, for being here. And just remember that this webinar has been recorded so you can come back and view it. And you'll all be receiving an email with a link to that recording and link to the paper with the same information we went over today. Thanks, everyone, for being here and for your interest in this topic. We hope to see you on the next Guava webinar.